Bonjour. Je suis très heureux d'être ici. I head up shopping and attribution in North Americas for Google. The key things about attribution, a little bit of a background quick on how I ended up here. I was the group vice president of analytics and CRM for Macy's.com for the last 4 years. This is my 6th month in Google. And I'm really excited to be part of what Google has in the making for understanding the conversion path, either online or offline, which I was tackling on the client side for the last 4 years. I heard a little bit of big data references in the French that I listened to a little bit. I always wonder, we talk about big data, but was data not big about 20 years ago when internet was not around? It sure was. And I'm sure it's the same thing. The data is data wherever it is, however it is. It's big when we are talking about understanding the customer journey and how the customers are switching between different screens and different devices to really find what they're looking for online and then buying offline. So it's an interesting path. And the path is revolving around a multi-screen world today. I'm sure everybody is trying to find out, what drives the purchase decision for a millennial. A millennial is as big word as big data in U.S. Retail these days. As they switch between multi-screen interactions, how do we impact the decision wherever the customer is, sitting on a couch, surfing on a tablet, buying in the laptop in their bedroom or man cave or office. It's an important understanding that we have to keep track of because the research and interaction with one device does not necessarily end up in conversion. Conversion, whatever you call conversion, is either purchase or it's sign up for a service or XYZ. But once you define what that conversion is, it is really important to understand how that conversion happens, even if it doesn't happen in the first screen that the customers are looking at. In the beginning of time, which I think I was part of when I was younger, and I think I'm revealing my age, but internet was not around when I was millennial of my generation. And we were pretty much happy when we had snail mail delivered to our houses. And we looked at catalog as, oh my God, I have the catalog, now I can actually find what I'm looking for. And if the catalog did not arrive, that was the end of the world. And believe it or not, decades later, for Macy's customers, some of them, that is still the case. The understanding of the conversion at the time was to look at the conversion path as a linear path that starts with awareness that drives conversion down the funnel. So it's a very linear. If you look at the offline media, you look at TV. Awareness happens on the TV, but you go buy in the store. Let's assume a world that there is no internet, right? So that's the conversion path. Today, with the internet, we have a constant exposure media bombardment. Not a bad word, it actually is a good thing. Media bombardment of the customers as they, like I said, go through the purchase path. Sometimes we call this path to purpose, not necessarily path to conversion, whatever the purpose might be at the end of the day or at the end of the week. They go buy from the store after they surf on the internet at work, which again is not a bad thing. Everybody does it. But at the end of the day, you buy from a store or online store at some other time. So this creates a very chaotic interaction with the media as the customers explore. So if you have ever worked with media mix modeling, you know what I talk about when I actually refer to incremental impact of a media on sales. Very regression-like linear capture of information that we try to understand. When you add digital to it, I'm sure like you, like me, you're scratching your head as to what to do with the media mix modeling when digital is around. Typical path to conversion starts possibly with a TV ad, does not necessarily end with online purchase. It ends possibly with conversion in the store because the store visit is preceded by not only just the offline media, but a sequence of online events, possibly a display exposure, then a search. Then right before you go to the store, you look at your mobile phone. You say, oh, there's a coupon coming in from Macy's. Let's go check it out in the store. And buy when you're there. You might change your mind. You say, okay, I'm looking at men's shoes. But men are not really good at buying shoes. I would rather go buy something else when I'm in the store. And I have to get out of there in 2 minutes, right? Different story for women. But the conversion stays the same. You are exposed to media along the path to purpose. We still talk about last click. How many of you know about last click? Okay. Last click is before you buy anything or before you convert, before you buy any services, sign up for catalog, sign up for insurance, buy stocks. Whatever you clicked on before that action happens is your last click, okay? So as an example from a retail site like Macy's, and I'm sorry I'm giving Macy's an example, but that's where I was recently for about 6 months ago. So I still remember the retail craziness during this time of the year, and I'm glad I'm out of there, but I'm in the other side of the house, in the dark side now. So craziness still goes on. The last click in Macy's world, somebody searches on Google for shoes. And then you have all the sponsored ads, organic, paid. Then now you have the product listing ads, PLAs. And sometimes we call them LIAs, local inventory ads, where you can actually see within an image the result of the search that you have done online. It shows you what shoes exist in Macy's, Nordstrom, and somewhere else. And you click on one of those ads, text or PLA, you end up on Macy's.com site. Your last click happened at a search result or a product listing ad result. Okay, so that's the last click. Now, why is it not fully great or right to look at last click only? We will probably talk about this in the panel. What happens before that last click if the typical path to conversion is like what we have seen before? What happens before that search? You may have seen a display ad. You might have seen the ad on TV. You might have seen an ad on your mobile phone, right? So there is a lot of interaction before that click happens. So what drives that conversion may not be 100% the last click that you have observed that happened before the conversion happened, right? So if you play with the big data, the very first thing you will see, last click happens quite often, right? But it's harder to expand beyond the last click towards the first touch point or first interaction, right? Because the big data may not actually tell you that, right? Because the agency data or the third-party display buy, you don't necessarily have access to. It happens on display networks out there. You, as a client, may or may not have access to, which was the case for Macy's. Not saying this is the case in everywhere, but for the most part, big data still is small because it still does not capture the entire world and give it to you in your hands. It will soon. And there are products that we have that will help you actually make sense of the world in a little bit of a better way, but it still needs you to play with tools that are not necessarily in your backyard. The other problem that we tend to face is that the marketers are living in siloed worlds. How many of you know of this structure? The search teams sit somewhere else, then the display teams and the social teams. In the Macy's case, part of the world lived in San Francisco, the other part lived in New York. Okay, so they specialize in certain media buys that are different inherently in nature, and they don't necessarily talk to each other. Data lives in separate worlds, right? So how do you make sense of this conversion path all the way from the first exposure to conversion when you have this siloed existence? Pretty hard, right? You have to get all of your data together and say, no matter how the media is bought, let's make sure that we understand how all this media interact with each other with the data we have that we put in one centralized place that captures entire marketing media activity. Easy to say than done. So attribution is a way to do this. Attribution is a way to understand how media interacts with each other. And there are different ways of doing this, right? The one way of doing it is bottom-up. You look at all the cookies, all the emails, all the customer touch points. You add everything up to understand what the last click was. Add up all the revenue impact. You have your attribution for last click. Okay? Easier to do. Not completely easy. Easier to do. That's why that's a starting point. And I strongly encourage every one of you, if you're dealing in this world, make sure you understand that last click really well. First, you have to understand what that last click means. If you don't understand what the last click means, you will not understand what the first click means, right? So you have to start from somewhere. Last click is your starting point. Attribution does not solve everything under the sun. If you go top-down, you have media mix modeling that looks at aggregate signals and tries to answer the question of what's the incremental impact of search on sales. Great, but it's aggregate, it's top-down, right? And does not always capture digital side of the house. So we are not quite there yet. You have to break down the silos. You have to understand the funnel, the conversion funnel, search funnel, store conversion funnel, and you have to understand between offline and online how those funnels interact. What is the tie between these media exposures? You can do a great job with Google Analytics if you have that already. That's really a great start. Google Analytics on its own can do a lot of things for you. Even the free version. The free version is full of new interesting attributes, interesting capabilities and modules that you need to master first. Then you can explore things like Google Analytics Premium that will get you to Universal Analytics. Okay, Universal Analytics, if you haven't heard about it before, it is version 2 of Google Analytics. Eventually, Universal Analytics will be Google Analytics. That's the version 2. Right now, if you have Google Analytics Premium, you have Universal Analytics. But you have to have the Google Analytics Premium in place first. All right, so there are different use cases here. For the attribution piece, intra-channel, you can already get that from Google Analytics. It's the understanding of what the generic and brand search interactions might be before the conversion happens. Multi-channel looks at it from a upper funnel to lower funnel interaction perspective. Usually, the best way to understand this, after you understand the bottom-up attribution piece using Google Analytics, you can and should test with display. Turn off display, look at search. Turn on display, look at search. See the lift. If there is lift, then display actually drives search traffic to conversion, right? So that's the multi-channel look. Now, a little bit of a complicated way of looking at things is online to offline, because what you need to do there is to upload your CRM data, marry it with your web analytics data, and see if the customer with a unique ID, talking about this is so easy. I did this myself. It took me 4 years. Hopefully, you will get that sooner. But with Universal Analytics, cloud platforms, the recent developments in cloud technology, You actually can't do this today on your own, right? Again, easier said than done, but once you know that your CRM data is clean, you can get that data married up with the web analytics data if you have one single key for the user that you're tracking, okay? With the older version of Google Analytics, that was not the case. With Universal Analytics, you have one user ID that's carried through. So you can actually have one key that you can map your CRM data to and track it across the multi-screen cross-device world, which is a big, big improvement. And finally, tie all of this to optimal media mix modeling, experimentation, and experimentation. Because what you're having, or everything we are talking about, is correlation. Correlation does not mean causation, if you know those two words. Experimentation is needed on top of what you're seeing with the correlated data that you get from web analytics. That is a must to maximize your overall ROI. What you can do today, you can start and have to start measuring everything under the sun. Even if you don't have attribution in place, attribution critically depends on your capability of capturing data, storing somewhere, and measuring everything. You have to tag everything. You have to measure everything so that you're not blind, right? And this is not a very new concept. In the offline world, we do this all the time. You have your CRM data, you have your transactions written somewhere for a reason, to then go back and look at why transactions happened in the offline world, right? Same thing happens here. It's a bit more complex, but you have to measure everything. Then you have to assign credit to the valuable touch point. What does that mean? Is everybody of the same value to the brand? Maybe not. Some people are more loyal to a certain brand name versus the others, right? They come back more often. So understanding new versus retained customer is critically important. And then put the retained customer, or the customer that you want to retain and come buy from you over and over again, put that customer in the middle of that journey is the most important thing you can do in the entire marketing career ahead of you. Rely on data to facilitate decision-making. Data drives decision-making. Data is there to help you make decisions. Data is not there for you to collect data. That's called hoarding, right? I hope you don't, nothing wrong with hoarding, but you don't want to just store data somewhere and let it sit. You want data to sing to you. I had a person who was working for me earlier in my previous job. He said he likes to torture data until it speaks. Strongly recommended. No harassment issue there. You can torture it as long as you want. If your data tells you that in the conversion path, display drives higher value, you have to understand that. You have to see if display actually creates that upper funnel impact that drives higher likelihood of purchase at the end of the funnel, right? Because then you can target your display campaigns for the people who actually are going to buy from you. Then that display campaign is much more effective than a blanket display campaign you run, hoping it sticks, okay? And then you can look back and say, okay, I ran the display campaign, I saw the conversion, because I compared display versus no display, now I know what the display value is in the upper funnel so that I can allocate the credit to the right display campaign exposure. Always run experiments and optimize your bidding to actually target the meaningful touch points across the journey. Help move undecided customers to action. This is really important because that's in your hands. If you know what the decided, undecided customer cohorts are, especially on display, you can actually make this happen. And then finally, boost exposure of campaigns and keywords supporting customer acquisition. If retention is your goal, that's a different thing. But acquisition, if that's your goal, then you can do a lot there. You shouldn't lose the sight of the customer, who the customers are, how many you have, how often they buy, and so on. This is important. And we are moving towards the world where customer is in the middle of everything. So understanding customer lifetime value is important, and the only way you can do that by having a common identifier across everything. Without that, it's really hard to do. I did it, don't recommend it. What else can you do on the digital world? If you understand who the valuable customers are, then you understand what media drives additional value for targeting the customers that are of higher lifetime value. Final takeaways. Use incremental insights to understand the journey. Iterate on opportunities. Experiment, 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 and put the customer in the middle. That is actually what the data is for. Thank you.